Hello. Today we're going to talk about beginnings and endings, or introductions and conclusions. The first thing we're going to look at is visualizing the process of introductions and conclusions. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. So we're going to take a look at the parts of the beginning or introduction, and that's going to be the lead-in, the thesis, and the essay map. We're going to look at the suggestions for writing a good lead-in, which are a paradoxical or intriguing statement, an arresting statistic or shocking statement, a question, a quotation from a recognized authority, historical figure, or literary source, a relevant story, joke, or anecdote, a description, often used for emotional appeals, a factual statement or a summary, a who, what, when, where, why lead-in, an analogy or comparison, a contrast or a before and after scenario, a personal experience, a catalog of relevant examples or facts, a statement of a problem or a popular misconception, a brief dialogue to introduce the topic, a proverb, maxim, or motto, a recognition, revelation, or insight, or an appeal to a common or imagined experience. Not all of these are relevant for research writing, so be very careful of what you use. For example, if you're writing a research-based essay in third person, you're going to want to stay away from things like quotes from historical figures or literary sources, because really at that point you should be opening with your own words. The same with like proverbs, maxims, or mottos. Really, these are interesting, but if you're doing if you're doing research-based writing, you want to stick with factual information. Some of these are applicable for the kind of personal essays we sometimes write. So to avoid errors in your lead-in, make sure your lead-in introduces your thesis. You want to keep it brief, but not too brief. Don't start with an apology or a complaint, and don't assume your audience already knows your subject matter. Make sure you stay clear of overused lead-ins. And to write a good ending or conclusion, you want to summarize the thesis and the essay's major points. You want to give an evaluation of the importance of the essay subject. You want to give a statement of the essay's broader implications. You want to give a recommendation or a call to action. You want to give a warning based on the essay's thesis, and a quotation from an authority or someone whose insight emphasizes the main point. Here again, I will caution you that primarily a conclusion should consist of your own words, and it should recap what's been said in the essay. Oftentimes when you try to bring in research or quotations, it winds up bringing in new ideas, and the conclusion is not the place for new ideas. You can also use an anecdote or brief example that emphasizes or sums up the point of the essay. You can use an image or description that lends finality to the essay. You can use a rhetorical question that makes the reader think about the essay. You can use a forecast based on the essay's thesis. You can use an ironic twist, a witticism, pun, or playful use of words, again, if that's appropriate. You can return to the technique used in your lead-in. And you can avoid errors in conclusions. You want to avoid a boring and mechanical ending. Don't introduce new points or irrelevant material. Don't tack on a conclusion. Don't change your stance. Avoid trite expressions, and don't insult or anger your reader. Also, do not cut and paste your opening paragraph or thesis and put it into where the conclusion should be. That's not a conclusion. That's cutting and pasting. If you want a further explanation and a more in-depth discussion on opening and closing paragraphs, you can check my YouTube channel. There are some additional videos for that. So, beginnings and endings. We can talk about how to write a good lead-in, how to avoid errors in lead-ins, and how to write a good concluding paragraph. But we're also going to talk about avoiding errors in conclusions and how to write a good title. So when you're writing a good lead-in, you want to catch the reader's attention. It should also announce the subject matter and set the tone for your essay. So if you're going to write a research-based essay, the tone's likely going to be serious. It's not going to be jokey. So your opening should match that. You don't want to open with a very light-hearted, jokey, playful introduction paragraph and then delve into like a super serious topic like death with dignity or something like that. So just make sure that your tone is consistent. You want to set up or lead into the presentation of your thesis, and you want to kind of give a map for where your essay is going to go. So again, we talked about earlier, I gave you some of the lead-in strategies. Here they're listed again. I'll give you a minute to take another look at those. I don't want to read them to you again. So when you're writing your lead-in, you want to make sure that your lead-in introduces your thesis. Again, you want to keep it brief. You don't want to start off with apologizing or complaining about something, but you don't want to assume your audience already knows your subject matter. You want to make sure you avoid overused lead-ins. To have a good lead-in, you want to give some background information on your topic and kind of show what you know about it and where you're going to go with it. For example, if you were writing about legalizing marijuana, you can start with a little background about how it's been illegal, but some states are now making it legal. Just generally common things that people know, but may not be totally clear on. You don't want to introduce a bunch of facts. You don't want to bring in a bunch of source material, but you want to give kind of a broad overview of what's going on, and you want to kind of show people where you're going to go with it. So once you've kind of given them some background, then you move into your thesis, which should be a pretty well structured statement that indicates where you're going to go with the paper, how you're going to get there, and what you're going to talk about. I have 2 videos on the YouTube channel that discuss thesis specifically. It's very important that you don't assume your audience already knows your subject matter, even if it's the most common topic in the world. There's still going to be somebody who isn't 100% clear. And you want to avoid overused lead-ins. So opening with extremely common quotes and things like that tend to be very overdone. Another important thing is to give your paper an interesting title. The title should never be the subject of your paper. So if you're writing about legalizing marijuana, the title of your paper should not be legalizing marijuana. If you're writing about the emotional impact of abortion on teenage girls, then your title should not be the emotional impact of abortion on teenage girls. You should give your title something interesting, and it should preview what you're going to say. So for example, if you're talking about legalizing marijuana, you want to draw the reader in. So with this topic, you would say something like going to pot, the effects of legalizing marijuana in the state of Kentucky, or whatever you're going to talk about. But you know, it's better to take a chance and try something original with the title than it is to use the subject, because it's just generally not your title. And I indicate that it's not a title, it's your subject, because it is. So then as you're moving through and then you get to your concluding paragraph, as we mentioned before, you want to summarize the thesis and the essay's major points. You want to give an evaluation of the importance of the essay subject, a statement of the essay's broader implications. So with that, you talk about your paper, but also, for example, if you don't do what I've said in this paper, then here are the impacts it could have. And that's the broader implication. So you really want to put that out there if it's relevant to your paper. All of these will not be relevant to all of your papers. Really, you should look at 1 or 2. You should always have a summary of the thesis and the essay's major points. It's generally a good idea to evaluate the importance of your essay subject, because with the papers I assign, you will be writing about usually an important subject. A call to action is where you tell people in your conclusion that they should go out tomorrow and volunteer for the libertarian candidates campaign so that we can do away with a two-party system and have a third party in place, if that was what your paper was about. Again, I generally don't agree with putting quotations from an author or someone whose insight emphasizes the main point. What I want to hear from you in the intro and the conclusion are your own thoughts and words. I want to know what you're thinking when you're opening the paper. I want to see your thesis to tell me where you want to take me and how we're going to get there. And then in the conclusion, I want to see why you thought this was important. And then I want to see you wrap the paper up neatly and reevaluate your main points. And also, it kind of lets me know how good of a job you think you did by the strength of your conclusion. And here too, everything is in context. So if you are going to use puns, playful words, and things like that, it can sometimes be a good strategy to take the seriousness out of a really big topic and kind of turn it around, but you have to be very careful because that runs the risk of alienating the audience. So if you're not sure you can do it well in a way that's not offensive, just stick to a traditional conclusion. So again, avoid a boring mechanical ending. Do not cut and paste from the intro. The conclusion is not the place to start talking about new points or irrelevant material. So if you didn't talk about it before, the conclusion is not the place to talk about it at the end. Your conclusion should not feel tacked on. Your conclusion should be something that you stop and think about. Otherwise, one of two things happens. It either seems like you just randomly stopped writing, or it seems like you were like, oh gosh, I have to make a conclusion, and then you tack on 3 sentences and it's not really effective. A conclusion is your wrap up, and this is a 100 level class, so give it your best shot. Try to reevaluate your paper, reemphasize your thesis, tell me about your main points. Don't worry about chucking in a funny witticism. It's not important. Entered in the same size and font as the rest of your paper. You want to capitalize the first, last, and important words in the title, but not small words like and the, or prepositions, unless those are the first word. And the title may be a word or a phrase followed by a colon that introduces some explanatory information, but don't overuse this style. So it would be like legalizing marijuana, colon, a bad idea. You know, so there you have it, a little bit about title, a little bit about intro and thesis and conclusions. Again, I welcome you to go over to my YouTube channel and check out any of the videos you would like. You're welcome to look at any. These are specifically reviews of your textbook, and the YouTube channel also contains information about those specific things but expanded. So there's a couple videos specifically on thesis, there's one about intros and conclusions, but it talks about these things a lot more in depth, and these are pretty important. They're the first and the last things that appear in your essay, so you want to try to make sure you do a good job with them in the title. Well, that's what people see first. So there again, I hope this helps. Feel free to take a look over at the other videos on the YouTube channel, and as always, if you have questions, get in touch with me. Thank you.